His is Cold Star, Tales from the Spine, where the Milky Way meets Andromeda. One voice. One merchant with too many hats. Keep your coffee nearby. You'll need patience for truth and laughter. My name is Ned Valen. You learn a lot about people when you fly with them. How they fix things, how they lie, how they apologize. But you learn the most about someone when they show you their childhood bribe. Enric had a childhood bribe. It involved a hat. Enric didn't start life as Enric the merchant. He began in a place the galaxy likes to put things it wants to forget and also sell again. New Venice Yard, a knot of ship hulks, salt and vendors who could price anything down to the exact moment you'd regret it. He grew up in a market stall where everything that could not be sold for parts was polished and sold for stories. His mother, a woman who could sell ice to a glacier, taught him the ancient family tactic: make warmth desirable. She wrapped bland bread in poetry, tied second-hand gloves into a narrative about the gloves' former heroics, and taught Enric to fold truth into margins. His father, if you ask Enric about him, he'll smile and call him a temporary investor, left ledger gaps that taught Enric how tidy a life could look when you dotted it with plausible entries. Young Enric's first trade lesson was simple and brutal. You either learn to notice a desire before someone speaks it, or you spend the rest of your life apologizing for missing the obvious sale. He learned to watch hands, not faces. A hand reaching for a thing reveals a map. A face can be performative. He started with small trades, a pocketful of metal washers for a new set of ink. Prosperity felt like a lighter pocket and a fatter story. There was one formative moment that became legend among his friends, and a minor embarrassment he'd rather forget in public. Enric was 10, and the market had a traveling show, a confidence artist who promised honest fortunes, and a small brass hat as a prize for anyone who could guess how many beans were in a jar. Enric, who could sense a bet like a dog senses rain, whispered to the hat vendor that the performer's pocket jingled with half a dozen times his courage. The vendor laughed and gave Enric a coin and the hat. Enric sold the coin for a candy and kept the hat because he believed the hat would someday help him look important. That hat became the first of many and the beginning of a superstition: hats equal leverage. At 15, Enric ran his first legitimate business, an umbrella rental for New Venice's frequent acid drizzle. He bought old rigging, patched them into umbrellas, and when it hailed solvent rain, he had every merchant and dockworker paying a fraction of their dignity to stay dry. He learned to build a product that solved a very specific misery. He learned how to spot a good margin. He learned to keep the umbrellas dry until the moment someone needed them, and to sell the story of dryness with the conviction of a preacher. The umbrellas got him a small loan from a woman named Myrna, who ran a small registry that doubled as a tea house. Myrna taught him ledgers with a patron's patience and a prosecutor's mischief. She stamped his first business license in ink that smelled faintly of jasmine and something sharp. Under Myrna's sign, Enric learned the gentle art of creative accounting, called creative because it involved improvisation, and accounting because people paid to see his improvisation succeed. Myrna also taught him an important principle: never ask a market for truth, sell the market a better lie. Ethics, she said, are negotiable if you keep the pain small and the music loud. His first real profit after umbrellas came from a contract to move a crate of ceramic insulation from New Lagos to New Reykjavik. The crate, it turned out, contained a set of antique hats, souvenirs from a wealthy corporation who'd lost them in a bad PR campaign. Enric negotiated the freight, rewired the manifest, and sold the hats one by one to sympathetic captains who liked looking dignified at ports. That crate paid for a small freighter deposit and a tassel of reputation. Enric's reputation is a patchwork, part charm, part audacity, and part that decidedly indefinable quality you call timing. He learned to read other people's limits and to turn them into opportunities. He learned to make modest promises he could keep and grand promises he would never try to keep. It's an art, promise enough to get interest, deliver enough to breed further belief. There were mistakes, many. Misreadings of tides, poor estimates of fuel burn, a brief and very public failure involving counterfeit hats and a freelance auditor who, enraged, threw a legal pad at Enric's head. Those moments taught him the most: how to apologize without looking weak, and how to convert public failure into a tolerable anecdote that buys you 3 more days to fix the ledger. The real turning point in Enric's life came not from market finesse but from people. At 20-something, he met Tor in a dim corner of New Venice where favors pass like coins and time keeps a tab. Tor was the kind of man who smelled debts like rain. He knew couriers, credits, and people who remembered things for the right price. Tor offered Enric a partnership, not legal, not formal, but functional. "You find the goods," Tor said. "I find the routes." Enric liked that arrangement because it suited his strengths and his taste for mild risk. Together they pulled small runs, courier routes, equipment swaps, and the occasional "we borrow from an abandoned freighter and return it with interest" scenario. Enric learned to prefer running with a crew rather than alone. He learned the comfort of accountability and the efficiency of shared cunning. He learned loyalty because Tor offered it by example, not by contract. Then came the hats. Enric bought his first proper hat not for status, but for charm. It was a ridiculous thing: large brim, too much embroidery, a feather that looked like it might get jealous. He wore it once to a market negotiation and noticed 2 changes. First, people treated him as if he had more confidence than he genuinely owned. Second, the hat was a conversation piece that made people tell him the truth when they thought he was too distracted to listen. He began collecting hats like other men collect tools, as instruments of trade. The hats acquired personalities. The Lucky Ledger hat made creditors more willing to believe in second chances. The Comfortable Lie hat made people confess weaknesses that had monetary potential. The Presentation hat sold 3 times better than an ordinary hat at the New Yukon auction. Enric bought a new hat after that sale and told himself the hat paid for itself. The hats became a currency of performance. Sometimes you wore one to negotiate. Sometimes you gave one away to seal a favor. Sometimes you sold one in 2 parts to 2 different buyers who both loved storytelling. Enric's hat habit became legend aboard small docks. He developed rituals: a hat for travel, a hat for negotiation, a hat for mourning, and a ridiculous hat reserved for celebrations after successful shows of unrestrained confidence. The crew began to use his hats as an emotional gauge. When Enric wore the spectacularly improbable hat, we knew he had a plan that had been priced by optimism and possibly taxed by danger. But Enric's origin isn't only about commerce. It is about a curious moral engine. He is not cruel. He commodifies, yes. He reinterprets stories for currency, certainly. He also, in his own way, prizes community. He learned early that the market thrives when people feel included, that a small gift secures networks as well as contracts. He is one of those people who will discount a shipment to a starving outpost and then proudly invoice you for the difference in a dramatic flourish, just to make it theatrical. When I met Enric aboard the Argus, he already had that mixture: the salesman's tongue, the merchant's spreadsheet, and a hat inventory that could outfit a small festival. He was good at making deals because he believed the world was a market full of not-yet-made agreements. He was better at making friends because he knew generosity pays in favors that accrue faster than credit, and you can drink favors. There is a scene that explains him best. We were in New Yukon, mud on our boots, a flake of gold in our wash basin, and a crowd whose idea of community included loud auctioneering and questionable radish rituals. Enric stood at the pedestal with the nugget and performed the oldest human trick in commerce. He made people want to be a part of the story. He sold not just metal but belonging. The nugget sold for more than its metal value, because Enric had wrapped it in a narrative that asked buyers to be patrons of the market's future. He pocketed the hat money, but he gave the market something that would outlast both the nugget and his receipt, a weather shield. That's Enric in small, a merchant, a storyteller, a ridiculous hat collector, and, if you press me, someone who believes that a fair trade is a kind of justice. He has faults, greed, theatricality, a tendency to try to bury awkward debts under layers of hospitality, but he is loyal when it matters. He buys hats, yes, but he also buys time and buys people out of trouble in ways that rarely make a good line item. When the Argus left New Venice and I asked Enric why he buys so many hats, he smiled, chose a feather, tucked it into his brim and said, "A hat is a promise you can wear." I believe him. If you ever meet him, ask about the retired furniture appraiser episode. If you ever need a favor, ask Enric first and then settle the details later. Just remember to compliment his hat. He'll give you a story in return and probably a small discount on insulation. End.